An elderly, frail man was shoved to the ground by a group of young men at a gas station, and no one stepped in. But just minutes later, two black SUVs came speeding in. When the doors opened, everything changed. Who were they, and how did they turn the whole situation around? Welcome to NT, where everyday kindness becomes unforgettable. Let's begin this journey together. On a scorching summer afternoon, an old blue-gray pickup truck rolled into a gas station just off a quiet hillside road. Its engine clanked and rattled like a tired heartbeat. Steady, unhurried, carrying decades in every turn of the crank. Behind the wheel sat an older man, thin and slightly hunched, a faded ball cap pulled low over his silver hair. On the brim, there was just one small black patch, no logo, no name. His name was Elliot Granger. 78 years old, he opened the driver's door with his left hand, the same hand that once disarmed bombs in the dark and sketched out survival maps for special ops teams. But nobody here knew that. Around town, folks just called him the old guy with the truck. He lived 6 miles outside city limits in a little house that hadn't seen a visitor in years. Every now and then, someone might spot him grabbing groceries or pulling up for a quick coffee. No wife, no kids, no close friends. No one knew that Elliot used to be part of a military unit so classified, half its missions didn't even exist on paper. No one knew, and Elliot never needed them to. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the gas pump. A long scar peeked out from beneath the sleeve of his thin button-up shirt. Sweat slid slowly down his spine, but he stood still, patient, focused, the way he had through countless stakeouts in Middle Eastern deserts. The wind rolled down from the hills, kicking up dust. The pump clicked in rhythm like a metronome. Across the road, a few younger folks sat under the awning of a sandwich shop, sipping drinks, not paying him any mind. A child pointed, "Mom, why's that old man's hand shaking?" The mother gently tugged the child's arm and shook her head, the kind of quiet gesture that says, "Don't stare, just move on." To them, Elliot was part of the background, like a dried tree in the middle of summer, still standing but barely noticed. But Elliot never cared much for attention. Peace for him didn't come from being seen. It came from knowing he'd done what was right, even if the world had forgotten. He screwed the cap back onto the gas tank, wiped his brow with a soft cloth from his pocket. A tiny speck of dried blood marked the edge, maybe from the cracked skin on his knuckles when he gripped too tight. But he didn't complain. He hadn't for over 40 years. Sliding into the driver's seat, he flipped on the radio. Soft jazz filled the cab, old, wordless, and familiar. Just like him, Elliot turned the key. The truck rumbled to life again, like an old companion that didn't need praise, only purpose. Ever met someone quiet who still managed to earn your respect? Comment respect if you believe there are heroes who don't need their names on banners to matter. Just as Elliot clicked in his seatbelt and rested his hand on the gear shift, a loud exhaust blast ripped through the still air behind him. Through the rearview mirror, he saw them 4 big motorcycles rolling in fast, peeling into the next lane, then stopping in a neat row. A group of bikers pulled in, young guys, all in studded leather jackets, arms inked up from wrist to shoulder. They didn't shut off their engines right away. Instead, they let them idle loud and proud, like revving was part of their entrance routine. One of them, wearing a red bandana, took off his sunglasses and squinted toward Elliot's old truck. "Yo, check out that rust bucket," he smirked. The others burst into laughter. Another whistled and added, "Dude probably drove that thing back from World War II." Elliot didn't react. He'd heard worse and faced far more dangerous things than some cocky laughter. But it didn't stop there. One of the bikers strolled casually over and planted himself right in front of Elliot's truck, arms crossed, a lazy grin on his face, but his eyes were poking for trouble. Another looped around the side and leaned against the driver's mirror, tapping it with a coin. "This thing still runs? What is this, a scrap metal delivery?" He chuckled like it was the funniest thing he'd said all week. Elliot sighed quietly. He opened his door, planning to say a few calm words to de-escalate, But the moment his boots touched the ground, one of them stepped in fast and blocked his chest with an arm. "Whoa there, old man, what's the rush? Let's have a little chat." His voice wasn't exactly angry, more like mean for sport, the kind that knows it has the upper hand and enjoys it a little too much. Elliot didn't flinch. Didn't step back, he just looked at the kid, steady, quiet, with the same kind of gaze he once used behind a rifle scope, waiting in a jungle for movement that could mean life or death. And maybe that calm, that unshaken presence is what set the kid off. Because out of nowhere, he shoved Elliot hard with the palm of his hand, not like an assault, more like a twisted prank. The push wasn't brutal, but Elliot was nearly 80. It was enough. He stumbled sideways, hit the truck door, and slid down to the scorching concrete. The whole group laughed. Not loud, not wild, just careless. One of them pulled out his phone and pointed it at the scene. "Man down! Grandpa Hollywood just ate it!" Across the parking lot, a mom pulled her kid close and turned away. A young man pumping gas glanced over, then stared down at his shoes. The cashier inside the mini-mart quietly stepped back behind the glass door. No one stepped in. No one said a word. Elliot lay there for a few seconds. Not because of pain, but because of something heavier. That strange, hollow feeling you get when you realize you once carried soldiers out of gunfire, you once held the line when others fell back, and now you're lying on the ground in broad daylight, while the very people you protected pretend you're not even there. Elliot braced his palm against the hot pavement. The skin tore slightly. Blood started to beat up in small drops. And then he stood, slowly, no groan, no curse. But inside him something shifted, quietly, but definitively. He rose like an old machine, remembering how to balance again. His left arm trembled slightly, blood trickling from a scrape at his elbow and falling onto the concrete below. Still, not a word. No anger. No finger pointing, just calm. The bikers had already walked back toward their motorcycles, laughing, tossing out more cheap insults like it was nothing more than a joke for a hot afternoon. But for Elliot, it wasn't new. It was something he'd met before. Injustice dressed in younger skin. He opened his truck door and eased back into the seat. With a steady hand, he pulled open the worn glove box. Beneath a folded leather cloth sat an old silver flip phone, the kind no one used anymore. Faded letters on the back read, "For real emergencies, R.A." Elliot flipped it open. No contacts, no apps, just one number, already saved. He punched the keys slowly, deliberately, as if each digit was a trigger for something far bigger than words. He brought the phone to his ear and closed his eyes, letting his breath settle, like it had in the old days, hiding in the brush, waiting for orders. One ring, two rings, then a voice, deep, crisp, professional. "Comm center, verification code," pause. Then Elliot answered, his voice low and scratchy, but sharp as ever. "Granger, IDD, Sierra Echo 72, priority activation." Silence. Then, "Confirmed, hold the line." Nobody at that gas station had any idea what had just happened. No one knew that those few quiet words were about to shift the entire tone of the afternoon. Elliot closed the phone and set it on the passenger seat. Then he leaned forward and rested his forehead gently on the steering wheel. He hadn't called out of anger, not out of revenge. He called because there comes a point where silence stops being strength and starts becoming complicity. Just 11 minutes passed. The heat still shimmered off the concrete. The smell of oil and rubber still hung in the air, and the bikers were still leaning against the tree line, smoking and goofing around like they'd just pulled off the world's dumbest prank. Then came the sound. Low, solid, unmistakable. Two black SUVs rolled up from opposite ends of the station, moving in sync like they'd rehearsed it. Government grade. No sirens, no flash, just presence. Heavy and undeniable. They stopped with clean precision, and the doors opened at the exact same time. From the first SUV stepped a tall man, fit build, crisp white shirt tucked in, a small badge just visible on his belt. He wore sunglasses, but his stride was all confidence, not rushed, not hesitant. From the second, a woman in full command uniform stepped out, sharp eyes, serious face. She scanned the area once and seemed to take in everything. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Elliot remained in the truck, but when he saw them, he smiled. Not with pride, not with arrogance, but the quiet smile of a man who knows he's not alone. The man removed his sunglasses, his eyes unmistakable. 22 years ago, those same eyes were wide with panic, standing in front of Elliot, unsure how to pull the pin on a grenade. Raymond Alvarez, now chief of police for the entire county, walked straight up and gave a firm nod to his old mentor. The woman followed closely behind. She placed a respectful hand on Elliot's shoulder and spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "You called, sir. We came." Now, people at the station began to notice. A cashier peeked through the blinds. A truck driver froze mid-step, still holding the bathroom key. The bikers stiffened, suddenly unsure. One nudged his buddy's sleeve. Dude, are they cops?" No one answered. They didn't have to. The air already had. Elliot slowly opened the truck door. The female officer offered a hand as he stepped out. He stood between the two of them, two former soldiers, now protectors of the law. He didn't need to speak. The silence said everything. The gas station fell still, like the whole world hit mute. The heat was still sweltering, the cicadas still buzzed in the trees, but no one heard it. All eyes had locked onto one spot. Elliot Granger, standing calmly between two senior law enforcement officers. A man who had once been invisible was now impossible to ignore. And then the first voice broke the silence, none other than Ray Alvarez, the chief of police, who had just bowed his head to Elliot less than a minute ago. His voice rang out, clear, steady, not loud, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "The man you shoved, insulted, and laughed at in front of all these people is Mr. Elliot Granger, former member of the Special Forces Strategic Unit, the man who personally led the mission that saved 18 American lives near the eastern border in 2003, including mine." Ray paused and turned toward the bikers, now standing stiff, their bravado gone. Their arms hung awkwardly at their sides. One of them clenched his jaw. Another stared at the ground. Ray's gaze never left them. "And in case you didn't know," he added, "he trained this police department's first rapid response team. He laid the groundwork for what I do today." No one said a word. Silence spread like ink in water. The blonde biker, the one who had made the first joke, stepped back, eyes down. Another one darted his eyes around, hoping someone, anyone, would speak and break the tension. But no one did. Then Deputy Chief Sarah Monroe stepped forward. She pulled out a small notepad and began writing. As she did, the tough bakers looked more like kids caught talking in class. Some bystanders quietly began recording with their phones. There were no more laughs, no more sideways glances. Something had shifted. Not because Elliot said anything, but because people had finally seen him for who he really was. From the crowd, a truck driver placed his hand over his heart and whispered, "I saw him shovel snow off my porch last winter." Didn't say a word, just did it and left. A softer voice behind him added, "I always thought he was just some lonely old man." That was the thing. People had looked at him, but they'd never really seen him. And within hours of the SUVs leaving the gas station, Elliot Granger's story was everywhere. Like a wind shifting in a small town, it spread fast. The video of Chief Alvarez and Deputy Monroe saluting Elliot went viral, tagged thousands of times. "Respect Elliot, the man we didn't see." The comments came in waves. "Wait, that's the old guy who waits for the bus near my street? He once gave me an old tire when I got a flat. He taught self-defense at our church last summer." Then came the apologies. Nobody had known he was part of a special forces unit. Nobody had asked. Because Elliot had never said a word, never wore his medals in public, never boasted. He just lived and quietly helped, like none of it was meant to be remembered. But now, the town started to remember. Like when you look at an old photo and suddenly realize someone in the background had been with you all along. A group of local students began handing out flyers that read, "Thank you, Mr. Granger." They went door to door asking for signatures. The coffee shop he stopped at every morning changed their board outside, reserved for Veteran Granger, our local hero. And just 3 days after the incident, the mayor organized an official ceremony in the town park. There was no parade, no fireworks, just a wooden podium, a few long benches, wildflowers, and a moment of long overdue recognition. That afternoon, more people gathered in one place than anyone could remember. Folks who used to walk past Elliot without a second glance now held handmade signs. "We're sorry. Thank you for never giving up. A hero in silence." And when Elliot finally stepped up to the microphone, same steady walk, same calm face. The whole park rose in silence. No music, no rushed applause, just presence. Elliot sat quietly in a simple white shirt, his eyes once sharp with wariness, now soft like still water. Then, from the back of the crowd, something no one expected happened. A group of young men walked forward, wearing black polo shirts. No leather jackets, no gloves, no sunglasses, just honesty. They walked slow, eyes forward, like they knew what they were about to do mattered more than any shame they'd ever felt. Leading them was the blonde biker, the one who had knocked Elliot down. No one called him up, no one invited him, but silence made space for him to speak. He stepped up to the mic, swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he began. "Mr. Granger, I don't have any excuse for what I did, but if you'll allow it, starting today, our club would like to volunteer as escorts for veteran funerals. Anytime, anywhere. Not to make up for what we did, but because we need to learn how to do what's right." The young man bowed his head. Low. No one clapped, no one whispered, just a strange, still silence. Elliot rose from his seat. He walked slowly toward the boy and stopped one step away. No lecture, no scolding, no speeches. He simply reached out and shook his hand. And with that one small gesture, he said something no sermon ever could. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you give. Even to those who once got it wrong. The young man choked up. A single tear slipped down his cheek. In the crowd, Deputy Chief Sarah Monroe turned her face slightly, her usual tough expression softening. She knew right then what her old teacher had truly taught them, not just how to fight danger, but how to forgive. At the right moment, to save someone from becoming their worst self. The week that followed, the biker group began showing up at the veterans cemetery. They mowed the grass, picked up trash, replaced torn flags, repainted the old white fence around the memorial, and the townspeople? They didn't mock them. Some even brought cold drinks and homemade cookies. Because maybe folks understood redemption doesn't come from words, it comes from showing up. Do you believe the right kind of forgiveness can save a life? Comment the word forgiven if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. The ceremony ended just as the sun began to slip into a soft orange glow, blanketing the park in warm light. There, near the oak trees, stood a new wooden sign. Elliot Granger Memorial Grove. Honor that speaks without words. Elliot left the stage unhurried, just like always. But this time, he didn't walk alone. A group of students waved from the crowd. An elderly woman placed her hand over her chest and smiled. And by the trees, those same 4 bikers now stood quietly, heads slightly bowed, hands out of their pockets, pride no longer on their sleeves, but in their hearts. They, the ones who once knocked him down, had now chosen to stand with him. No one forced them. No one told them what to do. They just knew. Knew they had judged too fast, looked too shallow, assumed an old man couldn't possibly matter. But Elliot held no grudges. He didn't need to preach. And when those young men stepped forward, stripped of ego and full of remorse, he simply reached out his hand. Again, calm, steady, forgiving, as if to say, anyone can start over as long as you start today. And they did. Not with big words, but with action. They scrubbed the headstones, painted fences. They learned to stand tall and silent at memorial services. No longer just anonymous bikers, but young men trying to become decent men. Because no, they couldn't erase the past, but they could change how others saw them. And maybe that's all redemption ever really is. Not pretending it didn't happen, but proving it won't happen again. And sometimes, one handshake can pull someone back from the edge. That evening, Elliot's old truck rolled quietly back toward the edge of town. When he got home, he didn't go inside right away. He stepped to the back of the truck and opened the tailgate. Inside, wrapped in an old cloth, was a sticker he'd kept for years. Proud veteran, still standing. This time, he didn't hide it. He peeled the back, smoothed it onto the rear window with his right hand, lined it up just right, then stepped back, looked at it, and smiled. Not because he wanted attention, but because he knew this town had finally started to see, really see. He passed by a hallway mirror. In it stood an old man, scarred, stooped, not as strong as he once was, but his eyes, still clear, just like the day he got his discharge papers. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. If you believe in the power of respect, redemption, and quiet acts of kindness, like, share, and follow NT Amazing Stories. Because here, we tell the stories the world forgets, but the heart never stops needing. Respect never goes out of style, and kindness always finds its way home.